My name is Natalie King. I'm 40 this year, and I work as a financial director for a small real estate company in Madison, Wisconsin. People who meet me now usually say the same thing. You seem calm, put together. And I smile, because I've practiced that smile. I've polished it until it shines like a protective coat. But peace isn't something I was given. Peace is something I built, brick by brick, after I fled the ruins of what my family did to my child. 2 years ago, my daughter Julia and I moved here. Madison became our fresh start, our new chapter, our healing journey. But if I'm being honest, it was an escape from Boston, from the house where voices turned into weapons, from the kind of wounds you can't photograph because they don't show on the skin, but they change the way a child breathes. Sometimes I stand at the kitchen window and watch Julia in our backyard. She's older now, 13, tall, all knees and growing confidence. She laughs more. She makes friends easier. She even joins clubs at school. And if you didn't know us, you'd never guess what she survived. You'd never guess that behind that bright smile is a memory she still flinches away from. A memory I've tried to bury for her. A memory I failed to stop fast enough. Today, in my company's break room, someone was talking loudly near the coffee machine, laughing, shaking their head, telling a story that sounded harmless at first. A coworker said his son kept getting teased by extended family. But then he described it. The jokes, the way they made the kids sit on the floor at gatherings, the way they stole food off his plate and told him, "You don't deserve it." I didn't even realize I'd stopped breathing until my vision narrowed and my hands went cold around my mug, because I knew that kind of cruelty. I knew the way adults can smile while they destroy a child, then pretend it was discipline, pretend it was love, pretend it was nothing. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Our story wasn't rare. There are children out there right now, living in homes where their pain is treated like entertainment. They don't have choices. They don't have a voice. And sometimes they don't even understand that what's happening to them is wrong. That's why I'm telling this story today. Not to ask for sympathy, but because I want someone listening, someone who's been brushing off a harmless family dynamic, to wake up, to pay attention, to protect a child before the damage becomes permanent. My story happened in August 2023. At that time, Julia was staying at my parents' house. And to understand why, I need to tell you who I was back then, what kind of mother I was, and what kind of daughter I still thought I had to be. I was newly divorced. My husband Trevor and I ended our marriage in December 2022. Julia was 10, an age where a girl starts needing answers she's too embarrassed to ask out loud. We divorced because Trevor had an affair. Not a rumor, not a mistake, not a complicated situation. An affair. And the worst part? He didn't even fight for custody. He was already building a new life, one that didn't include us. There were whispers that the other woman was pregnant, and Trevor acted like that erased everything he'd done. As if a new baby meant he got to wipe the slate clean. Maybe guilt made him generous. Maybe he just wanted to disappear faster. But Trevor left empty-handed. He walked away from the house we bought together. He walked away from $300,000 in savings that I had set aside for Julia and me. And he walked away from the responsibility of being her father. After the divorce, I became both parent roles at once. Every morning, I got up early to make breakfast, pack lunches, remind Julia to put on deodorant because she was starting to grow into that awkward stage. Then I rushed to work, watching the clock like it was a predator because I had to leave on time to pick her up from school. Evenings were a blur of dinner, homework, laundry, and the kind of quiet panic that comes with realizing your child is changing faster than you can keep up. There were nights she cried because she missed her dad. And I held her, listening to every sob, feeling helpless because I knew the truth. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't replace the image of a father in her heart. My parents lived about 20 minutes away, so I brought Julia over often. Dinners, visits, little moments I thought would balance what she'd lost. They were retired, usually home. They smiled when Julia arrived, hugged her, kissed her forehead. And I told myself, see, she still has family, even though I'd always felt something off. My parents had a softness for my older sister, Cynthia, a patience with her that I never received. But I still believed they were good grandparents. In early May 2023, my company offered me a 3-month business assignment in Paris. Paris. It was the kind of opportunity I'd been waiting years for, something that could lead to a raise, a promotion, stability. The word stability was a drug to me back then, because after divorce, every dollar felt like a shield I needed to build around Julia. But the trip meant one thing. I couldn't take care of her alone for 3 months. I hesitated. I fought with myself for days. And then, on a weekend evening at my parents' house, sitting around the dinner table, I finally said it. I got assigned a business trip to Paris for 3 months, I told them gently. I really want to take it, but I'm worried about Julia. Can you help take care of her while I'm gone? Looking back, the part that haunts me most is this. I never asked Julia if she wanted me to go. I made the decision like an adult who believed she knew best. And I didn't realize I was gambling with my child's safety. My parents looked hesitant at first. Then Cynthia, who always loved sounding practical, tilted her head and said, "If you're going to leave Julia here, you should send Mom and Dad money. It's only fair." She said it like she was doing everyone a favor. I swallowed my pride and nodded. "I can send $2,000 a month," I offered. And right after that, my parents agreed, almost too quickly. On the drive home, Julia was silent. Not sleepy silent. Not calm silent. The kind of silence that feels like a locked door. I watched her in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were distant, staring out the window like she was already somewhere else. At home, it took me nearly 2 hours to coax words out of her. I sat by her bed, stroked her hair, and promised her everything I thought she needed to hear. "Mom's only going for 3 months," I whispered. "I'll video call every day. I'll come back, I promise." Julia gripped my hand so tightly it hurt. Her eyes were wet when she finally spoke. "Mom," she whispered, voice trembling, "I don't want to stay with Grandma and Grandpa. I want to go with you." My heart cracked. But I didn't listen to it. I bet on family. I bet on money. I bet on the lie that love and blood automatically means safety. And that decision became the one I regretted for the rest of my life. I told myself the first few weeks in Paris were proof I'd made the right choice. Julia was out of school for summer break, so video calls were easier. Even with the time difference, Boston 5 hours behind, there was a routine that soothed me. Every day, after I finished meetings and my laptop finally stopped screaming notifications at me, I'd step out onto the small balcony of my hotel room, let the evening air hit my face, and call my daughter. That call was the one thing that made Paris feel less like a glamorous city and more like a temporary exile. Julia would answer with her hair messy, cheeks slightly flushed, usually sitting at the kitchen table at my parents' house. Sometimes she'd show me a drawing. Sometimes she'd read out loud from a book, stumbling over words like she still wanted my approval even through a screen. And every time I asked my mother, "Is everything okay?" she'd smile a little too brightly and say, "Of course, she's such a good girl, don't worry." My father would sometimes appear in the background, half listening, half watching TV, and when I asked again, because my instincts were still whispering, he'd wave a dismissive hand. "Stop overthinking. She's fine." But I noticed something I couldn't unsee. Julia was losing weight. At first, I tried to reason with myself. Cameras distort. Lighting changes. Maybe her face looked thinner because she'd grown taller. Maybe it was just the angle. But week by week, the difference sharpened, like someone was quietly erasing her. Her cheeks hollowed. Her eyes looked too big for her face. And when she smiled, it didn't reach them. One night, I pressed harder. "Mom, she's looking smaller. Are you sure she's eating?" My mother's smile stiffened for half a second, just enough for me to catch it. Then she laughed lightly, like I'd told a joke. "Natalie, you're worrying too much. Kids go through phases." My father leaned in and added, "Hayden did the same thing. They grow upward, not outward. That's why they look skinny." And like an idiot, I accepted it. I became the kind of mother I swore I'd never be. The kind who hears a warning bell and forces herself to believe it's just wind. After that, I started reminding Julia on every call. "You need to eat more, okay? I'll be back soon and we'll go for ice cream at your favorite shop." She'd nod, but she wouldn't look at me. Sometimes her lips would part like she wanted to say something, and then she'd swallow it down. Like there was a hand over her mouth I couldn't see through the screen. If I had been paying attention the way a real protector pays attention, I would have asked the right question. Not, "Are you eating?" but, "Are you safe?" Because while I was chasing a promotion, telling myself I was doing it for our future, Julia was living inside a house where love was conditional and cruelty was entertainment. And then her birthday arrived. Julia's 11th birthday was always sacred to us. Before the divorce, before everything, we had a tradition, a small party at home, chocolate cake, her favorite, a few close friends, a quiet moment after everyone left when she'd curl up beside me on the couch and whisper, "Best day ever." So being in Paris while her birthday approached felt like guilt sitting on my chest. 2 weeks before her birthday, I asked her on video call, "What do you want this year, sweet girl?" Julia went silent for so long I thought the connection froze. Then she looked up, and for a second her eyes were bright, hopeful in a way that made my throat tighten. "I just want you to come home," she said softly. "That's the best gift." Something inside me shifted, like a part of me that had been numb since December 2022 suddenly woke up, ashamed. I'll try, I told her. I promise I'm trying. And then life did something it almost never does. It gave me a chance. My project progressed faster than expected. Management emailed me, return approved, 2 weeks early. My hands shook as I checked the calendar. I could come back on Julia's birthday. The perfect surprise. The kind of moment that could heal something. The kind of moment I could hold over my own guilt like a shield and say, see, I didn't fail. I made it right. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents. Not Cynthia. Not even Julia. Because I wanted her joy to be real. I wanted her reaction to be raw and unfiltered. The evening before my flight home, on our last video call, Julia asked me again when I was coming back. Her eyes were wet, and she was trying so hard to act like she understood. To keep the surprise, I lied. I forced a sad smile. I really wanted to be home for your birthday, baby. But I'm still here. I'll make it up to you when I get back. Julia lowered her gaze, her voice small. I understand, Mom. I'll wait. The guilt stabbed me, sharp and immediate. But I told myself it was a sweet lie, a harmless lie. A lie that would become joy. I didn't know it was about to become the reason I finally saw my family's real face. On the morning of Julia's birthday, 9:00 a.m. Boston time, I landed. I didn't go home first. I had planned it carefully, like a mission. At the airport coffee shop, I double-checked everything, like a mother trying to control the universe with a checklist. I'd ordered a specials cake from a famous downtown bakery, a 2-tier princess cake, decorated with sugar flowers and delicate lace trim, exactly the kind Julia would gasp at. Delivery scheduled for 11:00 a.m. to my parents' house. I'd also ordered a pink bicycle, Julia's dream gift, scheduled to arrive at the same time. The day before, while still in Paris, I had called my parents and Cynthia to remind them. Julia's birthday. I suggested simple party games, her favorite foods, a cheerful atmosphere. I pictured it. A warm house. A smiling child. A cake and a bike. And then me appearing at the perfect moment. Joy doubled. A family moment that might smooth the cracks between us. Life rarely follows our scripts. At 11:15 a.m., my taxi pulled into my parents' driveway. The door was unlocked. I stepped inside, heart pounding, carrying my suitcase like it was a secret. The house smelled like familiar furniture polish and something sweet. Vanilla? Frosting? I moved quietly, almost laughing at myself, like I was sneaking into my own childhood. I passed the living room. No one. No music, no balloons, no chatter. Just silence. And then I heard voices from the dining room. I smiled. They're all gathered. Perfect. I walked toward the sound, already imagining Julia's face when she saw me. And then I stepped into the doorway, and everything in my body went cold. Julia was kneeling on the floor, not playing, not pretending, kneeling like someone had ordered her to kneel. In front of her was the cake. My cake, the 2-tier princess cake, shattered, smeared across the floor, cream splattered like someone had thrown it with anger. Julia's face was pale, her eyes were red, her small shoulders trembled, the kind of shaking that doesn't come from crying. It comes from fear. And sitting in front of her like a judge, pointing a finger like a weapon, was my older sister Cynthia. Her voice was sharp enough to cut. Get on your knees and eat it, she screamed. Eat it off the floor. Behind Cynthia, my nephew Hayden stood holding a phone, filming the whole thing. His mouth twisted into a grin like he was watching a funny video online. And my parents. My mother and father were sitting in their chairs at the table, watching Julia like spectators. No one moved. No one stopped it. No one protected her. For the rest of my life, I will never forget what it felt like to see that. It was like time slowed down and my heart turned into something molten and violent. I didn't think. I rushed forward, dropped to the floor, and wrapped my arms around Julia's tiny body. She was trembling so hard I could feel it in my bones. What are you doing? I screamed, my voice cracked with rage. What are you doing to my daughter? Everyone froze. Cynthia shot to her feet, stumbling backward like she'd seen a ghost. Hayden's grin vanished, but he didn't stop filming. My parents' faces twisted, shock, panic, and then something darker, calculation. Julia looked up at me, like she couldn't believe her eyes. Her lips trembled. Mom, are you really back? And then she broke. The sound that came out of her wasn't joy. It was relief. The kind of crying that comes from surviving something you thought you had to endure alone. Cynthia stammered, Natalie, when did you get back? My father grabbed the back of his chair, knuckles white. My mother recovered first. She always did. Her voice turned sweet, practiced. Julia dropped the cake, she said quickly. Cynthia was just scolding her. The lie hit me like a slap. You're lying, I shouted. I heard her telling Julia to eat it off the floor. My father stepped in, calm, like he could smooth it with tone. You misheard. And then I noticed Hayden, still holding the phone, still recording my daughter's tears like it was content. My hand moved before my mind fully caught up. I snatched the phone from him. Hayden yelped, reaching for it too late. My fingers shook as I unlocked it, because some part of me already knew. Some part of me already suspected the truth was worse than what I'd walked in on. And when I pressed play, the video started with the cake delivery. Julia's face lit up like sunlight. She hovered beside the cake, smiling so wide it made my chest ache. Then Cynthia entered the frame. She shoved Julia aside. Your mom spoils you too much, Cynthia snapped. Julia reached out like she was trying to protect her birthday. Cynthia grabbed the cake and threw it onto the floor. The sound of it hitting echoed through the phone, heavy, final. Julia screamed. Then Cynthia pointed and yelled, "Eat it off the floor!" And the whole time, my parents sat there, watching, silent, not one word, not one attempt to stop it. And in the background, Hayden laughed and said, "Mom, you're awesome." My vision blurred, not from tears, from fury so hot it made my scalp feel tight. I stared at Cynthia, the phone clenched in my hand like a weapon. She backed up, her mouth opening to explain, but I couldn't hear her. All I could see was my daughter on her knees. All I could see was my sister turning cruelty into a performance. And then I did something I never imagined myself doing. Something that would change everything after. I don't remember deciding to move. I just remember my body already doing it. 1 second I was standing there, the phone clenched in my hand, my chest burning with a rage so intense it felt like it might crack my ribs from the inside. The next second I was stepping toward Cynthia. She kept backing up, her hands raised, panic flickering across her face. "Natalie, wait, listen." I didn't hear her. All I could hear was Julia's scream from the video replaying in my head on a loop. All I could see was my child, kneeling, humiliated, powerless, while adults watched like it was entertainment. I shoved Cynthia hard. She stumbled, barely catching herself before falling. I dropped to the floor, grabbed a fistful of her hair, and pushed her face down toward the ruined cake. Cream smeared across her cheek as she screamed, thrashing. "You like making people eat cake off the floor?" I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Then you eat it." My parents shouted at once. My mother screamed my name like I was the criminal. My father lunged forward, trying to pull me away. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't the obedient younger sister. I wasn't the daughter trying to earn approval. I was a mother protecting her child. I let Cynthia go after a few seconds. She collapsed onto the floor, coughing, sobbing, her face smeared with frosting and humiliation. My mother rushed to her side immediately, grabbing a towel, wiping her face like she was the one who'd been wronged. "How could you do that to your sister?" my mother cried, her eyes blazing at me. "She was teaching Julia how to behave." Those words cut deeper than the cake ever could. Teaching. As if cruelty was a lesson. As if abuse was discipline. My father stepped between me and Cynthia, his voice low and threatening. "You've gone too far, Natalie." That was the moment something inside me went completely cold. I looked at them. Really looked. Not my parents. Not family. Just 3 adults who had watched my child suffer and decided it was acceptable. Behind them, Hayden ran to his mother and clutched her leg, shouting, "Don't make my mom eat cake!" But his eyes weren't scared. They were excited. That was when I knew this wasn't just about one moment. This was a system, a culture, a cycle that would keep repeating as long as no one stopped it. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. My hands were steady now. I dialed 911. The room fell silent. "I need police officers and child protective services," I said clearly. "There has been child abuse." My mother gasped like I'd slapped her. My father stared at me with a look I'd never seen before, hatred, pure and undisguised. Cynthia laughed. Actually laughed. Her voice was sharp, hysterical. "Let her call. She'll regret humiliating me." I didn't answer. I walked over to Julia. She was curled into herself, shaking, her face buried in her hands. I knelt and wiped her tears gently, keeping my voice low and steady. "I'm here. I won't let anyone hurt you anymore." I picked her up. She felt so light in my arms that my chest tightened painfully. Too light. I carried her out to the front porch and sat on the steps, holding her like she might disappear if I loosened my grip. She wrapped her arms around my neck, clinging as if I were the only solid thing left in the world. For 20 minutes, we sat there, just breathing, waiting. When the police car finally pulled up, followed by a civilian vehicle, Julia stiffened. I kissed her hair. "It's okay. They're here to help." 2 officers stepped out, followed by a woman in plain clothes carrying a briefcase. Child Protective Services. Cynthia rushed forward immediately, pointing at me, voice shrill and theatrical. "She attacked me." She pushed me down and forced my face into the cake. I want to press charges. The taller officer, gray hair, tired eyes, turned to me. You're the one who called? I nodded. He gestured for me to explain. I told him everything. The business trip, the weight loss, the video calls, walking in and seeing my daughter on her knees. The CPS worker approached Julia gently, crouching to her level. Hi, sweetheart. I'm here to make sure you're safe. Can we talk for a minute? Julia looked at me, fear flickering in her eyes. I nodded slowly. Just tell the truth, baby. While the CPS worker spoke with Julia nearby, the officer questioned my parents and Cynthia. They lied. Together. Smoothly. They painted me as hysterical, violent, overreacting. Then I pulled out Hayden's phone. My hands trembled as I unlocked it and handed it to the officer. Please, I said, watch this. The officer's expression changed as the video played. His jaw tightened. He handed it to his partner, then to the CPS worker. No one spoke. The truth didn't need commentary. They told us all to come to the station. Cynthia and my parents rode in the police car. Julia and I rode with the CPS worker. At the station, Julia refused to let go of my hand. They took her to a private room with the CPS worker. I gave my statement separately. I told them everything, including pushing Cynthia's face into the cake. I didn't justify it. I didn't excuse it. I told the truth. Hours later, an officer came back into the room. Your sister is being held for investigation of child abuse, he said. I exhaled for the first time all day. As for you, he continued, what you did wasn't appropriate, but given the context, protecting your child, you won't be charged. When I stepped into the hallway, Julia ran to me and wrapped her arms around my waist, sobbing. The CPS worker handed me a card. We'll be monitoring Julia's case closely. Then, quietly, when no one else was listening, she added, between us, you got there just in time. That night, I took Julia home. I cooked, I cleaned, I tried to make everything feel normal. But I could feel it. She was still holding something inside. And I knew, deep down, the worst of what she'd endured hadn't been said yet. In the days after we left the police station, I tried to rebuild our world with quiet consistency. I took 2 weeks off work without hesitation. Every morning, I made breakfast slowly, real breakfasts. Eggs, fruit, toast cut into neat triangles the way Julia liked when she was younger. I packed lunches even though she wasn't going anywhere. I wanted her to see food without fear attached to it. I sat with her while she ate, not staring, not hovering, just present. At night, I stayed beside her bed until she fell asleep. Sometimes she reached for my hand in the dark, like she used to when she was little. Other times she pretended to sleep, her back turned toward me, shoulders tight. She was safe now, but she wasn't free. The CPS worker, Ms. Alvarez, visited our home regularly. She was calm, professional, and patient in a way that made Julia relax just a little more each time. On the first visit, Julia barely spoke. On the second, she answered in nods and shakes of her head. After the third visit, Ms. Alvarez pulled me aside in the kitchen while Julia colored at the table. She's still holding something in, she said gently. It's common, especially when threats are involved. Threats. The word echoed in my chest. What kind of threats? I asked, already dreading the answer. Ms. Alvarez didn't speculate. We'll let Julia tell us when she's ready. That night, after Julia fell asleep, I sat alone on the couch and let the guilt wash over me. Every video call I'd brushed off. Every moment I'd trusted adults just because they shared my blood. Every time I'd chosen my career over my instincts. I kept replaying her words in my head. I don't want to stay with Grandma and Grandpa. And I hadn't listened. A week later, during the fourth visit, everything changed. Julia sat on the couch between me and Ms. Alvarez. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. She didn't look at either of us at first. Her voice came out small. Can I tell you something? I leaned closer. Anything, sweetheart. Her breath hitched. Promise I won't get in trouble? My heart shattered. I swallowed hard. You will never get in trouble for telling the truth. She nodded slowly, like she was bracing herself. Grandma and Grandpa, she began, her voice shaking. They didn't let me eat much. I froze. Some days, she continued, I only had one small meal. They said I didn't deserve more. The room seemed to tilt. Ms. Alvarez stayed calm, but I saw her jaw tighten. Julia's fingers twisted together. If I spilled something, or talked back, Grandma would say I was ungrateful. Her voice dropped to a whisper. She'd tell me I had to skip dinner. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. Julia rushed on, like she was afraid she'd lose courage if she stopped. Aunt Cynthia said Dad... She caught herself, eyes flicking to me. I mean, Mom spoiled me too much, that I needed to learn my place. My chest burned, and they told me, she whispered, tears finally spilling, not to tell you. They said if I did, they'd take me somewhere far away and leave me. They said no one would want a bad, ungrateful kid like me. I couldn't breathe. Ms. Alvarez handed Julia tissues, her voice steady but firm. Thank you for telling us. You were very brave. Julia turned to me, panic flashing in her eyes. Mom, are you mad? I pulled her into my arms so tightly she gasped. No, never. I'm mad at myself for not being there sooner. She cried then, deep, shuddering sobs that came from a place no child should ever have to know. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to my parents' house and tear down every wall they'd hidden behind. I stood up abruptly, my body vibrating with rage. Ms. Alvarez placed a hand on my shoulder. Natalie, I understand, but the law is already moving. Don't give them anything to use against you. I looked down at Julia's frightened face, and I sat back down. That afternoon, Ms. Alvarez sent Julia's recorded testimony to the police. Less than 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was the officer handling the case. Your parents have been arrested for investigation of child abuse, he said. I thanked him, hung up, and sat in silence. They were my parents. But what they'd done to my child was unforgivable. A month later, the trial began. The courtroom was packed. I sat in the front row beside Julia's attorney, holding my daughter's hand. When my parents and Cynthia were brought in, they looked smaller, older, worn down. Cynthia didn't look at me. My mother kept glancing over, her eyes full of something that might have been regret, or might have been self-pity. The evidence was overwhelming. The video, Julia's testimony, the CPS reports. When the footage of Cynthia smashing the cake played, the courtroom went silent. When the clip showed me forcing Cynthia's face into the cake, something unexpected happened. People clapped. One person, then another, then many. The judge slammed his gavel. Order! But when his eyes met mine for just a second, he gave a subtle nod. The verdict came quickly. My parents and Cynthia were sentenced to 2 years in prison and ordered to pay $120,000 in compensation for Julia's therapy and emotional trauma. Justice didn't feel victorious. It felt heavy. After the trial, Julia and I talked late into the night. We decided to sell everything in Boston. The house, the car, the memories that hurt more than they healed. We moved to Madison. And slowly, life grew quieter. 2 years have passed. Julia is 13 now, healing, laughing again. I have a job I love, and a man in my life named Ethan, my boyfriend, who knows our story and never pressures Julia to see him as anything but what he is, someone who cares. Recently, I heard through a distant relative that my parents and Cynthia were released from prison. They've tried to find us. They won't. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Never ignore a child's silence. Never assume family means safe. And never apologize for protecting your child, even if it costs you everything else. 2 years have passed since that day. Some mornings, I still wake up expecting to hear my phone buzz with a call from a number I don't recognize, expecting to see a familiar last name flash on the screen like a threat. But it never comes, because I made sure it couldn't. After the trial, after the sentence was handed down and the courtroom emptied, Julia and I didn't rush into a new beginning. We paused. Healing didn't happen like flipping a switch. It came in small, uneven steps. The first week after the verdict, Julia slept with the lights on. The second week, she started asking what was for dinner. Asking, not whispering. By the third week, she laughed at a stupid joke Ethan made while burning pancakes, and then froze, like she was afraid joy might be taken away if she wasn't careful. Ethan never pushed. That was the first reason I trusted him. He never tried to step into a role that wasn't his. He didn't demand closeness. He didn't tell Julia how to feel. He simply showed up, consistently, quietly, with patience. If Julia wanted to talk, he listened. If she wanted space, he respected it. And in a life where so many adults had abused power, that restraint mattered. Selling everything in Boston felt like shedding a skin that no longer fit. The house where I'd once imagined family holidays. The car I drove Julia to school in every morning before I knew what fear looked like behind her eyes. We kept what mattered. Photos, a few favorite toys, the bicycle that had arrived on the worst birthday of her life, and later became a symbol of something reclaimed. Madison didn't know us, and that anonymity was a gift. Julia started middle school without a reputation, without whispers, without a past she had to explain. She joined an art club. She made friends who only knew her laugh, not her trauma. She started eating like food was nourishment, not a test. And slowly, so slowly, I almost missed it. She stopped flinching when adults raised their voices in public. 2 months ago, I got a message from a distant relative. My parents and Cynthia had been released. They were asking questions, trying to reconnect. I didn't respond. I blocked the number. I didn't tell Julia until she overheard me on the phone and asked, "Do we have to see them?" she said quietly. I knelt in front of her and met her eyes. "No, never. Not unless you want to. And that choice is yours." She nodded once. That was all she needed. Today, when I look at my daughter, I don't see the girl on her knees in front of a broken cake. I see a survivor. I see a young teenager learning that love doesn't come with conditions. And when people ask me if I regret calling the police on my own family, if I regret going too far, I tell them the truth. I regret every moment I didn't listen sooner. I regret trusting silence over instinct. But I will never regret choosing my child. If there's one thing I want you to take from our story, it's this. Listen to children, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Because silence is never empty. Sometimes it's screaming.